GDPR is real is not so much about privacy. I mean, it's about privacy, but it's really a compliance system. Because many people, especially from the US, when we speak about privacy, they think of the original idea of privacy, which is the right to be left alone. So it's really a right of people that other people cannot get into their own life, which is it's the main idea of privacy, and you can find all of this in the GDPR. But the GDPR is something a little bit different, really. It's a compliance system. It means that if you process, and process is one of the words of the GDPR, because in Article 4 of this long piece of European Union legislation, there is Article 4 contains all the definitions. So processing means process, treat, put your fingers into personal data. And so the main idea of the GDPR is that if somebody starts processing personal data, then a number of obligations arises just for that act. So it's really more like a compliance system for organizations. It's something, for example, similar to can be ESG or sanctions compliance system, this kind of idea. It's a really complex legislation, which is for companies, for associations, for organizations, that if they process, if they put their fingers into personal data of people in the GDPR jargon are defined data subjects. Number of obligations arise just for that simple fact. And I think this is very, very important, because usually in the crypto world, when people speak of privacy, they think, for example, that the digital identity has to be preserved. The GDPR is a little bit different than that. So having said that, I will an important point is that the GDPR is a regulation, and I don't know how many people have an idea of the difference within the European Union legislation between regulation and directive. But that is like a very important difference in the European Union, because a regulation is a piece of legislation which is directly applicable in all 27 member states. The GDPR is the same law, the same text is for all 27 member states. You have different translations. It's translated in all 27 member states languages plus English. But really it's the same text. The directive within the European Union legislation means the European Union legislation which only establishes the general principles, and then every member state introduces that framework with its own domestic law. So that's not the case for the GDPR. The GDPR is a regulation, so it's directly applicable in each member state. This legislation is formed with at the beginning of the GDPR. There are a number of recitals of principles, and then there are the articles, which are about 40 or 80 articles. The recitals, and this is the same for every other kind of European Union legislation. The recitals at the beginning of the GDPR are very important because are like the principles. So the articles are interpreted by courts according to those principles. So really, you cannot only take into consideration the articles, but are very, very important also to give a look to the results. Okay, now. Okay, that's good. There is two different level of scope. One is the material scope, and the other one is the territorial scope. In terms of material scope, the main important point is that the GDPR is not applicable of the processing of personal data by natural persons in the course of a purely personal or household activity. This means that basically the GDPR as a piece of legislation is something which is addressed only to companies, to business. That is why I'm saying it's really a compliance system. It's a compliance system for business. If you are a business and your business implies the processing of personal data, like probably every kind of business in the world now is, you would like to look after the GDPR. If you are just somebody who is processing personal data at your home, it's not your problem, the GDPR. The second level of scope is the territorial scope, which is very, very much important because really the GDPR is kind of applicable all over the world. Because basically Article 3 of the GDPR says that this regulation is applicable if if the controller or the processor are established in the European Union. Controller or processor, especially my colleague will probably explain later what is a controller or a processor, but basically controller is the entity who decides to process personal data. So if that entity is resident in the European Union, then the GDPR applies. But also, and this is why probably it's applicable all over the world, GDPR is applicable also in the case of processing of personal data of data subjects resident in the EU by a controller not resident in the European Union, if that controller is offering goods or services to data subjects, to people resident in the European Union, or is monitoring their behavior. This means, practically, that, for example, a US company or a company from China, if it's selling goods or services to people resident in the European Union, and that's kind of normal because it's the world's biggest consumer market, the European Union, with 27 member states. Kind of every business in the world will be selling products and services to the European Union. So they will have, in principle, be subject to the GDPR. So that would be kind of a surprise for many, I assume, for many companies, for example, in the US. But still, they are really subject to the GDPR, although they have no any subsidiary or no any office in the European Union. What is the personal data? This is really the cornerstone of the GDPR because the GDPR applies when there are personal data and some entity processes personal data. So if there is no personal data, there is no applicability of the GDPR. And Article 4 of the GDPR explains very clearly what is the personal data. Means any information can be a name, it can be a picture, it can be a wallet, it can be an email. Those are all information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. So companies, legal entities do not have from under the GDPR perspective personal data, only people, only natural person. So any information, and I repeat, also a wallet, for example, the number of a wallet can be personal data under the GDPR. And the importance is that piece of information can be belongs to a person which is identified or identifiable. Here there are some examples like name, identification number, location data, online identifier. Of course, there are also, for example, the genetic information about the person. These are very, very sensitive kind of data. But all these are personal data. And this kind of data, which I repeat, are personal data, are processed, the GDPR applies. In a very important point, because usually there is a lot of misunderstanding about this, is pseudonymization. Pseudonymization means, and still is defined by Article 4 of the GDPR, the operation through which personal data can no longer be attributed to a specific data subject without the use of additional information. Usually there is a table, so you have, for example, number, some data, some information. Let's imagine some numbers. So a number is not in principle immediately cannot be immediately attributed to a natural person, but with the table of correspondence, it's possible to do that. And it's important to say that data which are pseudonymized, which have been pseudonymized, are still personal data, so still the GDPR applies. The GDPR does not apply when personal data are anonymized. And anonymized means that the data cannot be attributed to any person. There is no identifiable natural person which that personal data can be connected, can be linked. So basically, when we say, and or in some cases clients ask me, when the GDPR does not apply, when we don't have any kind of this problem with privacy. And in many cases, the answer is when data are really anonymized. But really anonymized data means that are data which you don't know to whom belong, and you cannot know. So, for example, pure statistical data, those are anonymized data. So you don't know. You know, for example, that let's say in a server might be, for example, the IOTA server, IOTA and Shimmer server. There are on average every day 100 people. That's an anonymized data. But if the avatar, the name that our ID from Discord. I'm sorry, I have some cough. Our ID from Discord, which is anonymous, because in many cases you don't have your name or your last name in Discord. That is not an anonymized data. That is a pseudonymized data, which is still personal data. So from this point of view, the GDPR really applies. I don't know if there are some questions. I basically finished my part of the presentation.
If you're willing, I do have a tiny question regarding the. Hello, sir. How are you? But yeah, I was curious why.
Sorry, Paul, I would recommend you to stop sharing the screen so we don't have the issue of last time that the screen.
Yeah, you are right. I made
presentation. So, yes, to interrupt you, go ahead with your question.
When can I go?
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, so it's regarding the anonymity. So what could fall under the constraints of certain anonymous data compared to so I understand pseudo-anonymous data and other personal information would fall in the scope of GDPR. What doesn't fall into the scope of GDPR?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Right. What falls into the scope of GDPR regarding or does not fall for anonymous data? You know, what would constitute anonymous data?
You're asking me what is anonymous data?
Yeah, what would be considered anonymous data?
I repeat, statistical data, data which is just statistical. For example, that you just know that on a website there are every day 1,000 visitors.
Right. Okay, so it's a more broad
But
scope.
For example, there's been a lot of discussion in the European Union with Google Analytics. Because Google Analytics, there's been a lot of struggle between Google and the European Union in relation to GDPR. So what happens is that the last version of Google Analytics, basically, because the prior versions, you could see the IP address of the visitors. No? So that is still a personal data under the GDPR. So what happened is that Google, the last version, deleted kind of all numbers of the IP address except for the last two numbers. So you can still see the last two numbers of the IP address of the visitors of the website where the Google Analytics is installed. What happened is that many privacy authorities in the European Union said that is still a personal data, because since Google has a database of kind of everything in the world, through its database is still able to get back the name of the person to whom that IP address, even with only two numbers, can belong. So so kind of really everything can be personal data. It's very, very difficult to say this is a real anonymized data.
Okay. So it's, so still pseudo-anonymous data, so various other aspects would fall into the GDPR scope, right?
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, and thank you, Paulo. I don't know if you have a presentation. I'm not sure that I received it, but otherwise, you can share it directly, or we can discuss your part now.
Good evening. I sent my presentation to Mariana, and I would like to ask you to run it on your own.
I'm sorry, where did you send it? Because I don't have it. I have Paolo's.
The general chat, Mariana, in the general chat.
Yes, our chat.
You sent me both? Okay.
I think the decentralized article and decentralized law article and the presentation before that. You can run the PDF or the PowerPoint presentation, it doesn't matter.
Okay, then Laura, I'm sending it to you so you can share it directly, because you are recording, so where you have better signal, because my signal hasn't been really good.
In the meantime, I'll do a quick intro. My name is Svetlin Konkulov. I'm legal counsel for a fintech company based here in Bulgaria. As part of my daily duties, I advise the different departments of this entity with regard to AML compliance and data privacy compliance, besides the standard legal drafting and the research stuff. In terms of cryptocurrency and blockchain space, we have one Estonian licensed entity that I exclusively counsel on the legal matters, and as well I'm a member of LexDAO, blockchain lawyers group that are great associations of like-minded professionals in the legal space, giving us excellent opportunity to exchange ideas and grow the legal practice. I contribute on the legal matters to Sporos DAO, and I try to be very active in the blockchain space, because it literally gives this a hunger for new challenges that are out of the ordinary business-wide, the typical legal work. If you are ready with that, you can you can start the sharing. Paul already mentioned the controller and processor as just some keywords to this second part of the section. GDPR provides a thorough definition of both terms, putting the controller as primary entity. Under entity, I mean the a legal entity, the legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body which, it, to some extent, alone or jointly with others, determines the purposes and means of the processing of personal data. I should emphasize that controller could be also a natural person that moves the liability of proper storing and handling the data in physical persons as well. On the other hand, processor could be also physical or legal entity, third party like public authority, agency, other administrative body that receives strict instructions by the controller and processes personal data on their behalf. This is the main division that
I'm sorry, I stopped hearing you.
I also stopped hearing.
As well, we cannot hear you. I don't know if it's just me. Can the others hear him?
No, I can't hear him.
Can you people hear me?
Yeah, I cannot. I hear you, Mariana. I cannot hear Stefan.
Okay, I'm gonna send him a message to let him know his audio is out. Maybe Paolo, in the meantime, you can go over the presentation if you can still hear us, or like you know his part, or
Let me call him. I mean, I don't want to jump into his feet. It's a matter of respect.
I understand. Let's wait 2 minutes to see if he can join. I'm gonna try to contact him and see if he's having internet issues. Just give me 1 second, please.
Kathleen, we can't. He's coming. I spoke with him through WhatsApp. He's coming. He has a problem with his personal computer, and he's joining the call through his mobile phone.
Great, thank you for letting us know.
hello.
Hello. Now we can hear you
Can you hear me
again.
now?
Now we can hear you. You're back.
Excuse me for this technical error. My notebook dropped that. I'm on mobile now. Tell me, please, where did you lose me?
We're still on the slide of the controller processor, and you were like finalizing with the recap of what Paolo said in that part.
Yeah.
You missed the definition part.
You started there. I think that was the last part that I hear was when you were going to start speaking about that.
All right, then. So on the grounds of exchanging personal information with some other companies, contractors, vendors, other partnering entities, companies that are controllers in such relation should be mindful of the obligations imposed by GDPR and laid out in Article 20. Controllers and processors should conclude a binding legal agreement that at minimum should contain the subject matter, duration, nature, and purpose of data processing, the type of data that is going to be processed, and different categories of data subjects for the underlying data processing. In such a legally binding agreement, both parties have the duty to mention the security standards under which the data will be moved here and there. Also, the processor is required to ensure that the personal data processed is subject to a duty of confidentiality. Processor is obliged to process data received from their customers, users, whatsoever, and process it in accordance with the document instructions of the controller. So the processor doesn't have any free space for decision making because of the fact they should act under the commission of the controller. If the processor decides to engage any subprocessor, they should be subject to the same data protection agreement and commit to the conditions of these provisions of the main agreement. The processor also is committed to assist the controller to ensure compliance with certain obligations under GDPR, like the mentioned data security of data processing, notification for any data breaches, and data protection impact assessment that perhaps Paul quickly mentioned that he's involved with making such as part of his professional work. In certain agreements that we may find in the practice, additional provisions could be included defining external conditions such as liability provisions, detailed technical security provisions, or additional conditions for compensations, damages dedicated to some of the parties. But what is essential, especially for a startup, is to rely on the mandatory clauses that Article 28 lays out. I would like to touch the responsibility of data controller because they have great significance for the companies that touch any personal identifiable information. businesses and organizations that process personal data are obliged to provide individuals with information on the type of processing, who is carrying it out, for what period data is stored, what is the legal basis for this data processing, and most importantly, the existence of individual rights under data protection regulation. I will mention them in a while, just to get your attention to another very important obligation of controllers, which is the lawful. Oh, excuse me for a second. I lost connection. Hello?
We can still hear you.
Do you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So I mentioned the transparency requirement. It is essential for the relations between the data controller and the data subject to give a transparent explanation of the way the data is obtained, and this inflicts certain obligations of the data controller to disclose information about the entity that is storing the data and processing it, all the points that I mentioned before. In the event that the controller has not obtained the data from the data subject directly, it is required to put information in an available place about the legitimate interest for collection and processing of this particular data, to mention the data protection officer contact information if it is mandatory for the entity to appoint one. Also to explain reasons for international data transfers. This is something that is very common in the blockchain industry because of the different places of establishment of different entities or DAOs. If the customer grants the entity with consent for processing of information, it should be openly communicated to the data subject that this consent could be withdrawn anytime. The data controller, once again, should explain the legal obligations and the conditions under which they have concluded various agreements with processors. And while the data processing inflicted an automated decision-making process, the so-called profiling, the controller is obliged to give a clarification to the data subject to what is the reason for that and what means they have in place for carrying out this profiling. Usually, this is a very, very sensitive topic, and the approach to it should be careful. Now, when we have a more clear concept on the roles of data controller and data processor, we can put in play two other definitions that are by nature not involving other entities, but they are defining the particular role of the party that could be mentioned as third party or data recipient. Third party, under the meaning of Article 4 of GDPR, could be natural once again, or legal person, public authority, agency, other than the data subject, the controller, the processor, or person who, under the direct authority of the controller or processor, process personal data. In your view, this is a complete nonsense, but from a regulatory lens, we may have a hypothesis when, let's say, two companies, local subsidiaries of a parent company based in third country, are required to compile user data and distribute it to the parent company. In such a case, this is a relevant example provided by the European Data Protection Board. This parent company, the addressee of personal identifiable information, could be defined as third party. In this relation, the parent company will be classified as third party. The recipient on its own is also a natural legal person to which the identifiable information is disclosed, whether a third party or not. A good example here is one from the travel industry business. Travel agencies that utilize clients' information for the purpose of provision of their service and fulfillment of their legal duties usually do various bookings for hotels, airlines, other providers, and use this personal data, sharing it with other business providers. But there is no controller there is no explicit controller to processor relation. They basically get the data and put it in the platform that they use in their business operations for getting you the proper tickets and secure accommodations for their subscribers. And the last point, because I can see that we are running out of time, individuals as data subjects, they have a number of specific rights under the data protection law to keep them informed and to keep them in a good position to get in control of their processing, to get in control of their data being processed by third parties. They have the right to be informed of data processing, how and why the data is stored or shared with other entities, the right to access and get a copy of this information and dispose with it as they like. The right to have the data corrected or supplemented if they decide it's inaccurate or incomplete. The right to request data erasure, or alternatively to limit or restrict the data processing to a certain extent. Data subject rights are also entitled to get their data out of certain controller and request to move to another party that could more effectively store it. This is the rate of data portability. There are also they also have capabilities and rights to object to processing of data. And when it comes to the automated decision making without any human involvement, at any point the data subject could raise a request and demand not to be subjected to such profiling if they find it that this process significantly affects them. In general, the information, the entire approach to be compliant with these very peculiar provisions of GDPR, especially for entities that touches user data. They can do this very simple test and ensure that all the data that they store and all their processes should be transparent, understandable, and easily accessible by customers. The controller shall use clear, plain language when explaining the users what the entity is doing and how it secures various aspects of data processing. Last but not the least, when requested by the data subject, the information that concerns some of their rights may be provided orally, provided that the identity of the data subject is clear or can be proven. What I advise the organizations that I work with is to make sure that they have a dedicated data security manager, data security administrator in cases when they are not obliged to appoint a data protection officer, which has very specific role. But even for smaller organizations, they can organize their processes, get all this specific communication and dealings with the customer who are recently very well prepared and demonstrate data protection awareness, and put some knowledgeable person from the organization to handle this matters. Of course, this entire topic could have its complexities, and in such cases, especially when the business model could affect many different territories, many different jurisdictions, I highly advise clients to consult with local privacy professionals. Let's say that if you have to transfer data internationally, of course you can rely to some good practices and the mandatory provisions outlined by the GDPR, but it is anytime better to get a professional opinion on the other side. If you have to send data to the States, to consult it specifically with the American lawyer knowledgeable in this matter, and secure, get a twofold security for this processing operation or for the expansion of your business. Last week, I had a very interesting call with starting project based in Austin, Texas, and they are running their venture locally. So I was clearly not in position to give them a proper advice on the data privacy specifics concerning Texas state. It is GDPR has made a significant progress and impacted development of data protection regulations in many countries. That is very good, but it doesn't make us some data privacy gurus. What I'm trying to say is that we have a fantastic opportunity to work with a world-leading legislative act that seriously affects development of laws in other countries. And I'm really happy that with international exchange of information, we have the abilities to exchange ideas and influence our efforts in ensure data privacy compliance from different perspectives. GDPR can be used as appropriate rulebook for all these starting organizations to ensure the minimum level of data privacy compliance. But for any specifics or uncertainties that you face, or you are unsecure about certain topics that you may think that the local authorities can treat differently, please turn these questions to the relevant local experts. But when it comes to securing the minimum of data subject rights and the general provisions of handling customer requests, storing data, commissioning certain roles and functions and responsibilities to third parties, GDPR can give you decent orientation and may serve as great underlying asset. Respectively, all the guidances and case laws and the practice that have been generated in the last how many? It is 5 years almost. Could be very appropriate for anyone who has the desire to dig into this very interesting space.
Esbeltin, just because I'm out of time and I want to be respectful with everyone's time and Finsazik, there is a question that I wanted to do to you that I think that is really interesting for the group, and it's in particular to the right to be forgotten that is in GDPR. And I'm asking because I read a report this week, especially on the issue of energy use cases, and they said that most of the use cases were staying only in the data recording of the energy, but not actually in the peer-to-peer transactions and payments due to certain GDPR concerns, according to the right to be forgotten. So if you can tell a little bit about that, I think that's really interesting, especially because the immutability component of the blockchain technology itself. So if you can, in 2 minutes, explain us what is right to be forgotten and actually how it impact blockchain and these use cases that I just mentioned will be great.
Well, my observation and my approach to this particular right is that in public blockchains, it is almost impossible or very, very challenging to ensure the original right, because everything it is stored publicly and shared among various nodes. The standpoint will be different if we have certain control over the network and could put additional security layer when the identifiable information could be anonymized. And these anonymized slices distributed among the nodes. But with this is, of course, my opinion. I want to give Paul opportunity to share his views as well. But with public blockchains, especially the biggest ones, I think that it's really hard to make the right to be forgotten available for the users without putting in place some third party solution or additional infrastructure that should be adopted by all the participants. Hello?
Yes, thank you. I don't know, Paolo, if you want to add something. I don't know if Paolo is still with us because he told me he needed to leave. But thank you for the answer. I think that it's a really complex topic. We like to just keep discussing, but I would like to give the last 2 minutes the chance to others in case you have questions. No. Silence is no. So if you have more questions, you can always reach out directly to us, Valentina and Paolo. And thank you very much.
To reply back if you have anything for us. Okay, thank you very much for attending this session. And I would like to remind you that there is another one in Spanish held by Paolo for anything else on these topics. I'll be glad to chat or to have some calls if you like. Bye from me.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining. We will share the record of this call soon on Discord.